Then out of the blue, as she's chanting and writing things down on the soil, out of her hands, these entities like
bashing their heads into walls, smashing down, punching them, bruising them. And this energy of me looking at her like, what is she doing?
So welcome to Lineage Liberators podcast. Welcome. My name is Joe Mkabi, and I'm here with Wef. We're going to bring all things lineage liberation. The one born without the veil, lineage liberators born with full vision to see our multidimensional reality. Lineage Liberators podcast. You are on a unique mission of inner traveling.
Lineage Liberators.
Purify and pave the path for those who have fallen. Lineage Liberators podcast, and for those who are yet to rise. Lineage Liberators non-physical, high-level consciousness matrices. Lineage Liberators podcast, the time-space continuum from one generation to the next. Lineage Liberators podcast. Your DNA is coded to constantly awaken the ancient and infinite. Lineage liberation tends longing to be of service to the divine.
Lineage Liberators.
Lineage Liberators podcast. Surrender your ego self into the eternal wisdom of your God self. Lineage Liberators become a vessel for the miraculous healing of fallen DNA within your bloodline. Lineage Liberators podcast. Spiritualizing, evolving, and liberating human DNA, consciousness, and lineages. Lineage liberation. Where's Xavier? All right. So this is what I dreamt of yesterday. I dreamt of a woman who seemed to be connected to you, and her name was Val, like a short for Valerie. We are together in my grandmother's house, me and you, and we're looking outside, and it's as if you have sent her, told her to go somewhere, and wherever it is that she was supposed to go to was like a fool's errand, essentially. And she got hit by something, because when we opened the door and looked outside, we saw her sitting down, like lying down on the ground. And now you are freaking out because you're like, what happened to her? And so we go to see what happened. And as she's lying down there, the closer we get to her, we realize she's actually not like hurt, or she was pulling us into her orbit, into her field, right? So when we get there, for whatever reason, maybe she needed us close to her, she starts chanting and putting a spell, speaking out loud the spell, and it's like she's mad and angry. And to be honest, I felt like angry at me, because then out of the blue, as she's chanting and writing things down on the soil and moving energy out of her hands, these entities like tiny little dogs, which is interesting because I think it's connected to the experience with the dog, and throwing these dogs, but they were not full dogs. I knew that they were spiritual animals or spiritual entities, and she's throwing these at me, at us, and we start running. And more of these dogs as well, like we started running. And of course, then the idea is that the dog caught me, but I don't remember the catch, like my body being caught by these entities. And then I just shifted, the dream shifted entirely, right? So this frequency of seeing a woman, or in particular for me, it's been seeing a woman making a spell inside a dream, has been coming up a lot, right? The idea of even witchcraft. Before, I never believed in witchcraft, but I start to see what that might look like when someone has ill intentions, ill emotions towards you, and how through words, through writing things down on the ground. That is what witchcraft is. That is what creating a spell is. When you are an oracle and you're doing this kind of work, and sometimes you're working with people's spirits, and these spirits are the unhealed ancestors, and they're restless, and they have their own ways of working. When you come with your own ideas of protocols of how things should be, and that's new, or that's like there's a resistance around that, I felt like that energy of a woman angry at me and punishing me was part of what I was dreaming.
Yeah, that's wow. Kind of question the name Valerie, what that means, and the origin of that name, where it comes from. Something we could look up, but definitely that shadowy, like you said, the witchcraft energy of when you're in your life of working with as an oracle. We have both been through that process, and when you are facilitating space for people and they have certain energies that latch on to you, and whatever havoc they've been causing for that person, they try to latch onto you. This is why, for me, my practice of dream alchemy, inner alchemy, sexual alchemy is so important, because until you have something that makes you blatantly aware that you have a wound, or you have an opening for different energies to come in and siphon and pull and manipulate, they'll be manipulating you all day, and you won't realize that this is not of your true organic path. So if there's a wound around a masculine wound, a wound around a father wound, a mother wound that you're still working on healing, these entities are like, oh, gold. We can eat all day off of this. We can pull it in because this is something that will be triggering for him or her, versus really being able to discern it. And it only takes an instant and a second. So that whole aspect of constantly checking in with ourselves and being like, is this who I really am? Or is there some type of external force that has been just kind of caught a glimpse of something and now it's hooked onto it? This dream is synchronizing with the work I've been doing, because I've been working on my lineage, on myself, of acknowledging this dark feminine, this Lilith consciousness based on the chastisement, the levels of abandonment and violence that connects to that dark feminine energy, and is very manipulative in terms of how it moves in the family, how it moves with emotions, how it moves with this false sense of parenting, this false sense of motherhood, when it's really this manipulative energy that's possessing and siphoning those energies. So to connect that with my dream, the dream that the most recent one I had today, was a vision of my grandmother being in a room, but in the room, she was surrounded by little people, very short people, and most of them were women, and they seemed very like welcoming and bright in personality. And my grandmother was coming in, picking up the little people, bashing their heads into walls, smashing down, punching them, bruising them. And this energy of me looking at her like, what is she doing? Those little women to me represented spiritual gifts, and we could call them fairies, but instead of like accepting that gift, there's this instant resistance to choose violence, to choose something that is not organic or natural in its own purest essence or form.
So today I saw this message from one of the women that I follow, and she was talking about how she has unlocked a deeper understanding of how the previous partner she had was actually a mirror of her vow to her father. So essentially the father wound, right? So she's like, I attracted the same man who is not wanting or needing commitment, right? And that was actually because my father was also the same thing. My father didn't marry my mother, but later on met someone and quickly on moved on with that person and committed to that person, but not my mother. And yeah, so I started to think about that, about how who we are magnetized to often is a reflection of either our mother wound, typically for the man, it's the mother wound, and for the women, it's the father wound, right? Like, so even for me, the parallels between my father wound and how that plays out in previous relationship, it looked a certain way. In our relationship, the strand is also a certain way, right? And this is the thing about dreams. It's like, it's a deeper dive into the subconscious material that are there, but also the ancestral energies that are within the self. And this is what we do a lot in terms of like lineage liberation, having to map these things, you know. So when you were saying, who is Valerie and what does that name mean to you? The only Valerie that I actually know is this girl that I went to high school with, who got married very young. She has mixed race children, and she's always been Christian. And she's an artist, she's a creative, she is a poet, all of the things. And I remember growing up, whenever I would see her posting about Jesus, always having the desire to be as certain about Jesus as she always seemed to be. And this is from the moment we're like 16 up to today, that her relationship, she's definitely a devotional being, but her relationship to Jesus has never unwavered, at least in terms of publicly. And I've always desired that level of certainty, because in my exploration of the greater cosmos, I'm never ever grounded in one belief system. As an oracle, I don't even think it's possible for me to be like, this is the truth, because my work itself opens me up to other dimensions of reality that I didn't know. Everything ancient in terms of instinct, it's actually danger, you know, like, so of course I will create such dreams where there's a spell and there's a bit of an attack that is coming to me. So it's my oracle feeling like you're out here challenging ancient beings on protocols and how they're supposed to work with human beings. And part of me always feels like, you don't actually know the stream and how vast the spirit realm is. And these ancient beings, like, as human beings, we can be like, this is not what's supposed to happen. And I'm one of those people. I love protocols. They've helped me to synthesize my work. But there are moments, you know, I can't exactly say no to this, because I don't know. I'm very much aware, because that there is a vastness to this realm and a vastness to the greater cosmos, the greater universe. And there's always something I'm discovering, right? So I think Valerie represented that people out there who are sure. And the thing is, when you are a lineage liberator, practicing lineage liberator, faith is important, your belief is important, but at some level, a lot of my work is about untethering myself from all belief systems. It's like I have to let them go, all of them, to actually see greater realities. If I'm attached and I say, this is how things are, I will never see the rest of the story, you know? So I'm constantly being floating in, not belonging to a particular belief system. And to my human, that's kind of like slightly dangerous, you know? Yeah, so that's just kind of like what came up when you were talking about other things, you know?
Yeah, that resonates. The idea, what you said of being the person that comes in with protocol, and there's this doubt in your mind of, this is an ancient being, so that means they've got to do something vicious to me, right? So it's interesting in the sense that we discussed before about eldership and wisdom, and that being an actual lineage of where we come from. So even though you're perceiving it from a 3D lens as you're interacting with an ancient being, realizing that even that whole situation was like the aspect and calling of a lineage liberator, of acknowledging that you are also an ancient being that has ancient consciousness, that believes in protocol and knew how things went, to where there was always a level of order, to where this being just isn't completely taking over someone's spiritual and energetic space with no means of self-respect and sovereignty. So that definitely makes sense. Yeah, it resonates to me of that impulse of always the doubt, the hesitation of, am I sure, am I certain? And as you said, as you are an oracle, you explore and always say, well, maybe I don't know it all yet. So that idea that, as you were saying, Valerie represents somebody who's holding on to a certain belief system. And many times people hold on to those belief systems for comfort and for a greater impulse is fear, because they're scared of finding out something that they thought was true turns out it's not true. Fear of finding out what they thought to be the absolute truth was not the absolute truth, it was relative truth. So there's always that tendency as well, of that energy of creating confidence, or I should say false confidence, based on the aspect of you're holding on to a belief system versus truly surrendering to the process. And of course, there's a balance to where you constantly are picking up and digesting bits and pieces of information from many different sources, to where you don't have a ground or stability. I believe the key is making sure whenever you have whatever you're anchored in, or whatever you're used to, or whatever you grew up with, allowing that to still be a foundation, but also allowing yourself to expand to other perceptions and other belief systems that end up being true once you explore them. And that can be a tricky balance between the two. But I definitely have experience in myself, and seen more so with women in my family, of the women tend to hold on to certain beliefs and cling to certain perceptions, because it's what almost everyone around them is expecting them to do. As the woman, they're supposed to be the glue for the family. They're supposed to be the spiritual house that their children can go to. And even if they're not certain of their beliefs, they have to have that certain energy that makes the children or the family feel comforted, when deep within their core, if they're honest, they still have different aspects they want to consciously explore, or subconsciously they're fearing them, but they're knowing that there's a piece of an aspect that needs to be explored, but they're scared of what the results will bring, what the outcome would be. And that, to me, is telling in that dream of how that energy was just kind of like moving in that way of possession and taking over certain energies of this. Most times it's hidden shadow body for people, is where there's this inner exploring and there's no boundaries, because the conscious part of the mind, or the daily active part of the mind, hasn't recognized there's something else. Though I need to study more, I need to expand myself. And as you said, for you as an oracle, you're constantly searching for that glimpse of truth. And the moment you think you know the absolute truth, there's this impulse to say, is there more though? And I believe the way to really unlock that is unlocking yourself first. We are limited in our perception based on our limiting beliefs for our internal world, on how we're perceiving ourselves, how we have to show up for other people, how we have to show up in a relationship, how we have to show up with our family, and questioning and going back with a fine-tooth comb. Am I showing up in my most authentic, true way to myself, to my spiritual evolution? Or am I still following a template or a program based on how I was raised, what people expect me to say, what people expect me to do? And am I letting that limit my inner aspect of what I could really be expanding to? And because I'm limiting this, there's this shadow body that's moving in the siphoning manipulative way.
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting because it goes along with the field report that I did for August, right? As I've been tracking as an oracle, I observe what's happening in the collective. I observe through myself and through my clients and my family and everyone around me what's happening in their lives. And there's always a map that unfolds, you know. And so I like to create these maps and do report citations. And what's been coming up, and a lot of people have been resonating with the resurrection of the dark mother and the dark father coming through for people. And that's like that very chaotic energy that is moved by a certain frequency of death culture, like wanting to destroy. And in the dream, the charge that this Val character that she was holding was absolute grief, right? Like it's like she was devastated, having lost her love, you in this case. Although I'm aware that these are my materials, so it's not even really about you. I actually recognize why the dream came because of what you represent, which is that you represent, I mean, besides being my partner, you also represent that which is foreign, a foreigner, because you are like an American man, right? So I know that the energy around that was symbolizing like my relationship with that which I perceive as foreign, new, unknown to me, you know. But the energy of that which is foreign is always chaotic and always scary, and the depth of that, right? And the thing is, the ancestral is actually feminine in nature because it's literally the earth, the physical body, and nature is chaotic. You know, Mother Nature is chaotic. And when she is in her emotions and her feeling, it comes at this whirlwind and this chaos, you know. Do not pull your partner into your chaotic roller coasters, because the feminine, we do have that. For me, I see it as capacity of our emotional range. Our emotional range is so vast that our feeling of grief, when it comes through, it can be explosive, especially if it's been sitting there for a while. And we obviously don't know how to allow it to come through. So it comes in a very chaotic, dark, manipulative energy, right? And that's because of thousands of years of suppression, oppression of the feminine as well. So we can't erase that. You know, that's also important. And also just naturally, I think people think they know nature, but nature does have patterns and archetypes. And this is where all the spiritual systems are about. It's about the study of nature, like even ancestral healing is the study of nature and how nature acts within the physical realm. But we all know that no matter how much you study here, there's still so much we still don't know. There's still so much. Just because we see it doesn't mean we really get it, you know. So that's the thing about the feminine frequency, which is interesting because, yeah, for this conversation, I didn't think it would go to that. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. The feminine energy can be very chaotic and irate, and that is, as you said, the nature of our reality. And just the earth energy is when you see tsunamis, you see oceans crashing down on houses and all of that. It's very telling of that type of energy and that potential. And the masculine representing, I guess, to a degree, order and structure. And as you said, even in the dream, you're mentioning of how I represented something foreign, something different, and something new. And honestly, in our relationship, I feel like I've always represented that to a degree symbolically, challenging you to step outside of what you're used to doing, the way you're used to doing it, and seeing it in a way that is more healing and holistic to your actual well-being, your actual livelihood. And same with you, bringing the chaos impact of knowing that no matter how much you try to plan or you try to rationalize things, some of the most profound healing and emotions can be experienced in a moment of chaos, more so after the moment of chaos is over. The level of awareness, just like the huge wave of water that's washing to shore all the stuff that was in the ocean that you weren't aware of, right? So that impulse of that feminine, natural, chaotic energy can pull up things that you otherwise would not acknowledge were in the ocean or in the room or in your emotional space or in your ancestral realms. They bring that to the surface. So definitely makes sense. And I believe that that dream you gave is very symbolic and very layered. Yeah, just from a lot of different aspects. And even going back to my dream of the feminine energy smashing the little people or the fairies is telling for me of what I'm dealing with from an ancestral lens for the lineage I come from. And it's just like a mirror for you. Like I'm meeting someone who's their day in life is an oracle, to where you're completely surrendering to spirit, to the nonlinear thought form, thought process. And I'm coming from a lineage who the women did not do that at all. They're bashing, beating the spiritual energies that's in the room that are coming to try to assist them. They're violently not accepting them. So, and with that type of energy, there's a level of confidence and the level of independent woman energy that goes with that, to where inside you're like this cuddly teddy bear that really needs some love, support, and is scareful. But to the world, to the outside looking in, you look like this very strong-willed, strong-minded woman, right? So strong, tenacious energy that is projected based on that devotion to knowing or that devotion to something divine.
The fairies, they are the guardians of the air, in terms of like they clear the air. And what do they clear the air of? They clear the air of our collective thoughts and our collective belief systems, right? So every time human beings, we are thinking negative thought, they are pulled into our collective psychic environment, and it's the fairies that clear that as the elementals. So it's like the most, this is why I always like intrigued by the elements and intrigued by nature, right? So the fairies are that as well, like bringing a very powerful medicine to a lineage, which is to clear the thoughts, perhaps here in this context, the thoughts that your grandma may have about the spiritual gifts in the lineage, right? Whether these are thoughts of fear or thoughts of like resistance or thoughts of like misunderstanding, whatever the thoughts are, they're definitely part of like why there isn't stepping into those thoughts, those gifts, and cultivating those gifts, which is a huge part, I think, of like Western culture, where Western culture doesn't recognize gifts as important and vital to be cultivated. This is just based on my work as an oracle, working with people from America and the US and the UK and Europe, that what in Africa we grow up knowing that that's a gift, or that's something that needs to be cultivated, or that person is good with this. That's not always the case, right? So the fairies, they come forward to remind us of, you know, our creation ability. We are able to create the lives that we want for ourselves through how we think, what we think about, what we believe, right? So if we don't believe that we are gifted, that it matters that we are these people who dream events before they happen. We are these people who feel deeply what other people are feeling. If we don't recognize that as something worthwhile, worthy of being cultivated and worthy of being utilized to make our lives better as the collective, which is essentially what the lineage liberator is. The lineage liberator at that core is that person who cultivates these things that in our physical realm, they are seen as unimportant, you know. And in general, what we do believe and think about will influence who we become, you know. So I think for me, when I think about what has influenced me to become an oracle is because years ago, and now I realize I was being initiated by the fairies. My first teachings were around thoughts and belief reconstruction, changing your beliefs, and mastering your beliefs and not being stuck in one particular belief system. Because when you do, that particular belief system grounds you to a particular experience, right? Like there is a literal collective hub of every belief system. If I am religious, it's like my consciousness is plugged into that religious grid. If I am African spirituality, my consciousness is plugged into that, right? And that's my belief. We will determine the experiences I have, right? So as an oracle, you can't allow yourself to be plugged into these belief systems. What you want to do is to connect with the true organic thoughts of God, which is what we call the mind of God, like me reconnecting with the mind of God, such that the thoughts I have are aligned with organic thoughts or the organic nature of reality. Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on and on, so I'm going to stop here.
Yes, I agree. That whole aspect of an oracle that can't be plugged into that paradigm. And yes, I agree. In my dream, it was very telling and showing of how my lineage and my grandmother has all these other gifts and all these other energies that want to help. And as you said, bring this mental clarity in terms of the expansion of the being that she really is, the potential that's really in the room. And there's this rejection of it. And for her, it's a Christian viewpoint of I serve the Lord, Jesus is God, that's it. Don't come to me talking about no fairies, no spirits, no talking to dead relatives, all of that. Although honestly, my grandma has experienced all of that, where she's told me stories of where she was in a house that was haunted, to where she could perceive spirits. So even that is like the impulse of, even if something is shown to us, as you said, when people are locked into a particular grid system, it becomes very challenging for them to see the other half, or the omni-view perspective. And I agree that it's very important as a lineage liberator, as an oracle, even for me as a priest, for me to consciously and openly call myself a priest now, that was a level of healing. I never thought I would be saying I'm a priest or reference myself in that way based on the church background I came from and waking up and being conscious. But to me, when I say priest, it doesn't mean somebody who's in the pulpit preaching, having long, extensive lectures. Even that impulse I'm working on balancing for me, because that's all I saw that type of energy as, is just sit down, tell people to sit down and just talk to them and they listen. And in a lot of ways, I've noticed that many people that are on social media and other YouTube platforms, they're not saying they're a priest, but the model is the same. They sit down, they tell you something, and people either accept it or they don't. But there's no actual processing of how is this being perceived to someone else? What can I do differently? How can I shift this up in a way that is challenging myself and forcing myself to expand in different ways? So yeah, for me, priest is just like someone who is devoted to spiritual ascension, in a lot of ways, I guess a male oracle, devoted to the hidden aspects, the expansive aspects of the divine, the Christ impulse. And when I say Christ impulse, so anybody who's listening or watching automatically associating Jesus with that, it's not quite the same. It's more so the sun, the light, that cross that happens between us when we are challenging ourselves to level up, to evolve our spiritual game, to evolve our emotional game, to evolve our mental game to a higher level, to heal ancestral patterns and curses. That's challenging. So to me, when I say Christ impulse, it's also and often connected to that crisscross, which again is the cross, but for me, it means something different. You're challenging yourself, you're going past the level or the realm that your previous lineage has dared to go beyond, and to create this level of reverence The same reverence that my grandmother has for Christian perceptions, now I'm expanding that to a wider lens that includes African indigenous systems and cultures, and doesn't dismiss the idea of ancestors, doesn't dismiss the idea of indigenous practices.
Yes, this path of being an oracle and being a priest, it's constantly asking us to expand our ideas of reality, our ideas of what we grew up believing in. And the more we do that, the more we can find the true Christ empowers, as you're talking about, which is what this podcast is. It's the authentic path and authentic exploration of the mysterious and mystical experiences that we are both having, and how they're supporting us in the cultivation of our gnosis, right? And sharing that with everyone who's joining us in the podcast. There are so many other experiences that we will be sharing in the coming episodes. And so I thank you for joining us for this first episode, for everyone who's here. And if you are inspired, if you feel a resonance, please subscribe to our podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube and share, like, invite some of your friends who are on the path of lineage liberation, who are wanting to get a deeper insight of what the life of an oracle, the life of a priest, the life of the lineage liberator looks like. Thank you, everyone. My name is Joy Muhammad, and I look forward to connecting with you once again.
Yes, thank you, everyone. My name is Wes Xavier. Be inspired, be encouraged, for all the lineage liberators out there. Until next time.
Lineage Liberators podcast, spiritualizing, evolving, and liberating human DNA, consciousness, and lineages. Lineage liberation. All right.